chosen name for this, and some interesting things that happened that led up to this plenary talk. A really interesting talk. I don't know if you want to present the paper as is. I'll let Anind summarize the actual paper. But it might be interesting to have a little bit of a reflection on where the community's headed. So just 4 years ago in 2010, Gregory Abel talked about what's next, Ubicomp, and the assertion there was we claim success now in some ways, and that a lot of the concepts in ubiquitous computing are not permeating many of the other disciplines. But it'd be interesting to kind of get an introspective view of what Ubicomp is looking like and where we think that field is headed. And so we invited him in to give a short plenary on his thoughts about where Ubicomp is going, where the conference is going, and where the field is headed. And so without further ado, I will introduce Anind Dey.
So I will start by saying that the paper wasn't intended to be humorous, right? It was actually a real, thoughtful, scientific piece. And I do plan to present the work of the paper because I do think it is a genuine contribution to the community, even though the PT chairs decided in a very thoughtful way that it was not, it didn't quite reach the bar for Ubicomp acceptance. All right. So, let me begin. If you indulge me, just for a few moments, I'd like to read to you from the Book of Wiser, chapter 1, verse 1. Computer for the 21st century. It begins, the most profound technologies are those that disappear. They weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life until they are indistinguishable from it. Mark Weiser wrote that we are nowhere close to such a world when it comes to personal computers, and that the whole idea of us running around with personal computers was completely misplaced. Quote, such machines cannot truly make computing an integral, invisible part of the way people live their lives. Therefore, we are trying to conceive a new way of thinking about computers in the world, one that takes into account the natural environment and allows computers themselves to vanish into the background. The idea of integrating computers seamlessly into the world at large runs counter to a number of present-day trends. Now remember that Mark Weiser wrote this in 1991, but it's still true today. He also said, ubiquitous computing in this context does not just mean computers that can be carried to the beach, to the jungle, or to the airport, nor for that matter, over a cliff when you're so focused on catching the next Pokemon. Ubiquitous computing will enable nothing new, Mark said, but by making everything faster and easier to do, it will transform what is apparently possible. The last line of his article reads, machines that fit the human environment, instead of forcing humans to enter theirs, will make using a computer as refreshing as taking a walk in the woods. Now, I don't know about any of you, but in my humble experience, in all of my computing experiences, it's never felt like computers were disappearing from my life. In fact, the opposite was completely true. The contrast with what we expect of computing, which is this lovely walk in the woods, and what we actually get is a complete contrast. Most of my computing experiences have been much more like this post-apocalyptic nightmare. So, Ubicomp community, the authors of this paper had just one question for you. Where's my fucking walk in the woods? So, in my role as head of the steering committee of the Ubicomp conference series, I'm also presenting a public service announcement today. Because my goal is to show you that we can actually achieve this walk in the woods that we were all promised so many years ago. So, if we begin by keeping with the woods theme, we created a word cloud in the shape of a tree in a forest using the Book of Wiser, chapter 1, verses 1 through 54. You can see that a lot of the main themes that Mark Weiser spoke about came through. You see displays, computing, boards, tabs, pads, network, people. And if we step back just a little bit, we can see other words that pop out. It should be really clear that Weiser was leaving lots of cues for us. In this Book of Weiser, he was highlighting a solution. Not just talking about how computers would have to disappear or vanish, but talking about systems that fit our human environment. He was highlighting a solution on how we can get our walk in the woods. Look at this word cloud. computers disappear. People go refreshing, walk, woods. It's all right there before us, if only we take the time to look at these important words. So, as refreshing as a walk in the woods, that's what we have to be aiming for. We've taken so many wrong turns in our attempt to achieve this. The clues are all here, like I said in the Book of Wiser. We just have to look for them and search for them. And we have to get off this hamster wheel of just developing technology for technology's sake. So where have we gone wrong? The goal of computing that Wiser spoke about so eloquently still eludes us. We think that by putting technology everywhere and in everything, we'll end up with a better world. Because computers can go everywhere, researchers and product developers feel like they have a contractual obligation to stuff computation to every possible object. But just because you can, doesn't mean you should. So for example, we have technologies like this belt that has an LCD display on it. Or these jeans that have a keyboard built into the seat of your, it's ridiculous. We have smartwatches that no longer just tell us the time, but instead require us to perform some intricate and a natural gesture so that it turns on 4 to 5 times. There are now smartphones that perpetually remind us that our inbox is full and unmanageable. There are fitness trackers that would remind us that we promised to take a 5-mile walk, that we have a 5-kilometer run that we promised we would do, only if we remember to actually wear it today. There are even smart smoke detectors that can tell us that if fire is occurring with the exact same accuracy as their low-tech counterparts, only after we install the latest firmware and download the dedicated application for it. My favorite, though, or the worst, are robotic vacuum cleaners. With a device that is supposed to save us time, we actually have to clean our house before the robot can clean the house for us. Absolutely ridiculous. So this is one main area in which where I think our community has gone completely wrong. We placed our souls into the hands of computing technology in every aspect of our lives. There's hope. All isn't lost. So Mark Weiser had this vision of what ubiquitous computing was in 1991. Schwedick alluded to Gregory's talk from 2012, where he attempted to give us all hope and tell us what the future of Ubicomp could be. Actually, forget that. He actually said Ubicomp was dead, and we should just all go home. End the conference series and just go home. I honestly believe, all due respect to Gregory, as often is the case, he was just wrong. There was one useful thing in his talk, which I want to point out. So, he pointed to a possible way out for us, what he referred to as this natural progression of humans' relationships with computing. As he's known to do, he didn't go quite far enough in this progression. We actually believe that beyond this 4th generation of computing that he was referring to, there is a 5th generation. And so the remainder of my talk is going to be about this paradigm shift, how we can take this further to this 5th generation of computing and all achieve a refreshing walk in the woods. So, yesterday our keynote speaker gave us a wake-up call. Actually, he scared the shit out of us. And then he gave us a wake-up call. At least he scared the shit out of me, I should say. So, whereas he gave us choices like mass genocide and complete economic instability, I have a very different set of choices for you, hopefully a more palatable set of choices. So, choice 1, we could do what Gregory said a few years ago and said, to say, declare victory, we've solved Ubicomp, or declare failure, we can't achieve Ubicomp, and just go home. After tomorrow's closing sessions. Choice 2, we can continue on the path we're on. We can keep shoving technology into every single place we can think of, which is what we're doing right now. And the choice 3, which I hope you understand is the only choice I think that's possible, viable, is to really fundamentally rethink what Ubicomp is. So, I want to present to you Ubicomp version 2016. It's a new model of Ubicomp, and the idea is that we should no longer be hampered by today's technologies, or yesterday's technologies. And the way we want to achieve this, the way we want to truly achieve this disappearing computer, this way that computers will vanish from our lives, is to actually literally remove all computing from our lives. So, after all, what could be more refreshing than a walk in the woods? Than a walk in the woods that doesn't actually involve any computing? We believe we can make any experience better simply by removing computing from that experience. I don't know if you noticed, but even Snow White had a phone in this idyllic picture of the woods. Wouldn't her life have been better if she wasn't getting texted by the dwarves every 5 minutes? Wouldn't her life have been better without the technology? Wouldn't she have definitely felt more refreshed in her time in the woods? we don't have computers, what are people going to use to get their work done, to communicate? Our new paradigm says, get rid of computers and instead use people. So, why use people? Well, people can perform any task for us. They can do things that computers already do, like tell me what time it is, send a message to someone around the world, whatever it is that I need them to do. A person can take care of those tasks. And they can do things that computers can't do right now, like tell me if I'm in a good mood, or tell me if I'm about to walk off a cliff while I'm chasing after Bulbasaur, the latest Pokemon. So now the question is, who are these people that are going to perform these tasks? And I have to say I have a great answer for you. These people are called Wiserians. These are the people who are the disciples of Weiser. They know, they love his preaching, they all abide by the Book of Weiser, and Ubicomp. And they would give their lives to make Ubicomp happen. As they all desperately want to facilitate a world where everything is as refreshing as a walk in the woods. Now, I've been told by our lawyers that we have to put up some disclaimers that make it clear that we're not a cult. And in no way am I intimating that we should start a cult to have these Wiserians in our lives. Disclaimer that. So, these Wiserians, what do we actually need them to do? They can do a lot for us, and they can do almost everything that we are trying to achieve in the Ubicomp community, but failing to do year after year. They need to be able to sense what's going on in their environment. They need to be able to understand what's going on in their environment. And then they have to act on what's going on in their environment. Now, I will say we've had years of wasted effort trying to produce this in computational systems and been very unsuccessful. I will say also that if you look at the cumulative effort of all the authors on this paper, there were a number of authors on this paper. If you look at their cumulative effort, it's over 80 years of wasted effort trying to make this vision come true. Instead, what the Wiserians have been doing, and I'm a new recruit, let's say, that was years of wasted effort on building Ubicomp technologies and using consumer technologies, has honed their skills to be able to sense, understand, and act. So, what do we get out of this Wiserian approach? What are the benefits? Well, it allows us to live in a Ubicomp world today without computing technology. No more invasive sensing where we have to strap ridiculous devices to our body or to the environment. No second-rate training of classifiers where most of us don't actually know how to apply machine learning. No creating magic but useless interaction techniques that enable me to see what time it is by flicking my wrist 10 times. No more unnecessary interruptions by devices that think they actually know better than humans do. Wiserians are ultimately reconfigurable, which makes them perfect for this setting. They can adjust to any given situation. They can monitor our activities, they can provide us ultimately useful services and information anywhere and anytime. Now, in order to judge the quality of this Wiserian approach, we actually have to introduce a new metric to measure. This is a scientific paper. We have to introduce metrics, we have to do validation. So we designed a new metric called actually building a Weiser's dream. So, it's a unit of ubiquity. It measures the distance between our sense of identity, who we are as human beings, and what a Ubicomp system provides us. And the important thing to note about this scheme is that the lower your score, the lower the score on the actually building on Weiser's dream scale, the better off you are. So you're trying to get as close to zero as possible. So if we start out with desktop PC, it's got the highest and worst score because it's nothing like a human being. So it gets the worst score on the actually building on Weiser's dream scale. If you look at crowdsourcing, here you're thinking, okay, well, people are involved, but they're people who are solving computationally intractable problems that are being given to a crowd that are hiding behind a set of computers. So their score is also quite high, because it's not really what people do every day. One approach that we thought was very interesting is the Wizard of Oz prototyping approach. Now it starts out quite low, because it's a person that's taking the place of a computer, unbeknownst to a person who thinks that they're interacting with a computer. But that score actually rises quite high because the whole goal of Wizard of Oz prototyping is to then replace that person with a computer. So you're then back to a system that involves computation. So that really leaves us with just Wiserians, which in theory has a score of 0, and the best score on the actually building on Weiser's dream scale. So obviously that metric name is a little unwieldy, so we'll just call it ABOUT for sure. Okay. So our contributions of this paper, right? I think we have a number of significant contributions despite our state program committee deciding we didn't. So we're presenting a new vision of Ubicomp where we have no computers. I've already talked about that. I'm going to present you a model for how to actually achieve this vision of Ubicomp, and then provide you some studies that we conducted to validate that we can create interactions that are as refreshing as a walk in the woods. Okay. So I said before, Wiserians have sensing, understanding, and acting. Sensing and understanding is innate to Wiserians, particularly more so than most people, because they've had so many years to really think about how to perform this task for other people. So we need to focus, the goal of the model is to really focus on the acting part. How does the system know when to, how do these users, how do these Wiserians know when to take action? And we're going to use this model to validate that all other approaches are less A-bound than others. And actually the preferred state is no A-bound. No A-bound is the preferred state. So, I want to present to you a fantastic piece of work that I've been influenced by for well over a decade. This is Eric Horvitz's model of when an autonomous system should take action when it's trying to decide whether or not to take action when you have a system with uncertainty in it. So, you have these two curves, the curve of action and the curve of not inaction. The curve of action tells you what the utility score of taking an action when you are correct about what a user's goals are, and when you're incorrect about what a user's goals are. And similarly, the curve of inaction tells you what's the utility to the user if you take action when you're right about the goals, and when you're wrong about the goals. So you have these intersecting curves, and then you have what evidence you have about the particular environment, and you can probabilistically identify whether you know what a person's goals are. And depending on that probability and where the curves intersect, you can make a decision about whether to take action or not. So this is a very mathematically sound model. It's a theoretical model, but it's been applied in many different settings. So we're going to start our model from here, because we like to be based on theory in our MATLAB. So, except instead of autonomous systems, we need to model how Wiserians would react. So, we're going to introduce a few Wiserians. It shifts the probabilities a bit. Wiserians add some mass to the model that was unaccounted for in the Horvitz model, due to the fact that, well, these are people, not pieces of software that have non-zero mass. The model was a good first attempt at trying to understand how to model the use of Wiserians, but it didn't adequately represent enough Wiserians for any given situation and the appropriate probabilities of taking action. So if there weren't enough Wiserians, we can just add a few more. So our next model, version 2, solves for the bendiness of version 1 by replacing some Wiserians with many Wiserians. However, the model is still pretty unpredictable. Even with a few uber Wiserians that you can see at the top left and bottom right, bottom right and top right, to help coordinate the other Wiserians, to the point that it's not really clear that you can achieve maximum utility with this model. So that ended us up with our final model. So in this final model, we extend the model to include what we're calling Wiserian actions. Wiserian actions yield infinite utility. We know that a properly indoctrinated Wiserian is capable of producing Wiserian actions such that no matter what the probability of the goals that a user has, Wiserians will always take a useful action that will maximize the utility to infinity, thus achieving a theoretical no A-bound score. The question is whether that no A-bound score, that theoretical score, is achievable in practice. So now that we've described the theoretical model, I want to talk to you about some of the studies that we've conducted to test whether you can achieve that no A-bound score. So I will say that the studies I'm going to describe to you were done with appropriate IRB approval from Carnegie Mellon and consent of all the individuals involved. So we did two studies. The first study focused on sensing and acting, and the second on sensing and understanding, and the second focused on acting. So we recruited a 32-year-old graduate student at Carnegie Mellon, his wife and child, a 2-year-old child. They live in one of the primary recruiting requirements was he lives in an area called Forest Hills, so it already evokes this idea of going to the woods. We observed this individual for 24 hours using 7 Wiserians, and the only thing we asked the user to do is to wear a Microsoft band. So our goal was not to intervene at all. It was just to let them live their lives because we were focused on the sensing and understanding piece and really see how well Wiserians can sense and understand, really validating the first part of our hypothesis about the Wiser doctrine. So what did we actually do? We observed a bunch of things, when activities started and stopped, with low-level activities like sitting, standing, walking, and high-level activities like cooking and making small talk with your wife or child. Our evaluation was, well, how good were the Wiserians in counting steps compared to the Microsoft Band, a reasonable commercial product? We wanted to see which activities could the Wiserians understand that no existing technology would be able to support. And we compared the accuracy of the Wiserians' ability to detect and identify different kinds of actions, different kinds of user actions and behaviors by comparing them to our traditional gold standard, which is non-Weiserian observations. So, what's going on there? Okay. So, Weiserians are naturally gifted in observing. Let's see. I can't fix that. I don't know what's going on. Okay. So, Weiserians are naturally gifted at observing and understanding what people are doing. So, they were really good at doing low-level and high-level activities, identifying when a user was interrupted, identifying overlapping events like cooking, talking, and even watching YouTube, whether it was for research or not for research. Here you can see a couple of photos of Weiserians observing the participant in the field in everyday life. Note that we made a strong effort to hide our Weiserians. We did not make a strong attempt to hide our Weiserians in this study because that wasn't the goal of this study. A good sensing system needs to be unobtrusive and also needs to be updating my screen, but not up there. Okay, so a good Weiserian system needs to be unobtrusive and know when to stop recording, and stop inferring, and stop remembering. An unexpected result of our study was to see how well Weiserians could actually do this without being told to do so. So Weiserians remained calm in all situations and didn't interfere with the subject's activities. For example, they stopped observing automatically when the subject went to the bathroom without being told. Imagine strapping a wearable device onto your wrist and just having it stop recording you when you went to the bathroom. It'd be very hard to build. They kept a polite distance away when the subject was putting his child to sleep. And when the subject fell asleep, the Weiserian also pretended to fall asleep to make the subject feel more comfortable. Weiserians only used a flashlight to check on the sleeping subject after they were convinced that he and his wife were actually sound asleep, because they were thoughtful. I can't see any images on this slide, unfortunately, but this is the only image that I would have shown you that was not actually from the study, because the subject's wife was not all that excited about sharing the image of her in bed for some reason. So, based on these results I have presented to you because of the issues of the slide, we can conclude that study 1 was a resounding success, with Weiserians performing better than any system possibly could. No other system can compete with Weiserians for sensing and understanding. However, they're not quite no A-valid on our metric, as we'll describe in a moment. Here it is. Okay, so study 2, let's just jump into it. So study 1 focused on sensing and understanding. For study 2, where we wanted to study actuation by Weiserians and use the model that we illustrated earlier, with Weiserians performing Weiserian actions, we hid a number of Weiserians in the participant's office and throughout our campus and assisted them throughout the day. And the kind of feedback we got from the participant were, wow, I don't have to touch the lights anymore. I feel so caffeinated because there's coffee's just showing up in my coffee cup. So what does this actually look like? Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot one other thing. When the user's mood was a little bit off, the Weiserians tried to do some singing to influence his mood. We don't have the best Weiserian singers yet, but the thought was definitely appreciated by the user. So he was really impressed by how invisible the Weiserians were, even though they were sensing, understanding, and acting completely in this environment. So here's a setup for our system. In this picture, we see the user who's living Weiser Street. We have a door actuator. Weiserian is just in charge of the door. We have another Weiserian whose hand is pointing up, who's in charge of the lights. And we have a third Weiserian in this picture. There's actually 6 or 7 Weiserians that you can't see. But this third Weiserian is a calmness checker. And every few minutes, this Weiserian would just reach out and check how calm the subject was. And if the subject was not calm, they were told to calm down as quickly as possible. So those of you who got to see Saeed from Cornell present yesterday on cognitive rhythms will know that you could use technology to check for alertness and understand the impact of stimulants like coffee. But here, we can just use Weiserians, who can not only just understand the impact of stimulants, but can deliver them unobtrusively to people. So the calmness checker is also the person who's needed to pour coffee. So Weiserians were almost perfect at anticipating people's needs. And one of these, an additional Weiserian that you didn't see in that original picture was responsible for helping the person feel refreshed and in the woods. So every 5 minutes, not to be too obtrusive, this Weiserian was responsible for asking the user to go to the woods. Every 5 minutes, again, not to be too obtrusive. So after 2 such requests were denied, a forest appeared in the user's environment. And the comment we got back from our subject was, "It's pleasantly surprised by this lush forest that just appeared." So, I just closed my eyes for a moment and I felt like I was transported to the woods. Is anything more beautiful than that? That is why we read the Book of Wiser. When the forest needed refreshing itself, the Wiserians took responsible for watering it. We also brought small woodland creatures as well, which you can't quite see in this picture. They run around quite a bit. So we've refreshed both the plants and the woodland creatures. Sometimes we accidentally splashed the participant, but that led to a greater feeling of feeling refreshed in this environment. Behind there, you can see the woods representative, who's checking to make sure that the user is taking regular walks to the woods, and when they don't, brings the forest. Occasionally, we did get the participant to the woods. The Wiserian would tell the person where to go and where to walk, paying special attention to the calmness of the path that they were taking. Now, if we look back on studies number 1 and 2, we evaluated our vision and modeled for ubiquitous computing, and that of using Wiserians to perform Wiserian actions, to maximize utility and value for the user, with the goal of making the user feel refreshed, just as they would from a walk in the woods. In all due modesty, we can declare complete success in our studies of these Wiserians. So I'm going to end with a few recommendations for the community. We actually believe that by taking technology away, we can improve on the Wiser's vision. We can achieve Wiser's vision and move beyond it. We think that using Wiserians will have a huge positive impact on the world, negating many of the horrible visual images that we saw in yesterday's keynote speech. One of the challenges, though, and this is where an important recommendation comes in, is there are not enough Wiserians yet in the world, and we need to add more to our membership. If you do a search in Ubicomp, for the term Ubicomp in the Microsoft academic search, you get a list of authors that's actually 1,204 long. This is only a list of the top 10 or 15 or so. Many of these are Wiserians. I'm not at liberty to say who is and who is not, unfortunately. But this seems like it's fertile ground for attracting more to our membership, and we'd be happy to indoctrinate many of these top authors into the inner circles of the Wiserian doctrine. An additional problem that needs to be addressed is that we feel a need for our Wiserians to be more invisible than they already are. Sometimes the subject's child and cats interacted with Wiserians, and we weren't sure about how appropriate that word was, as that wasn't part of their indoctrination and training. Sometimes the Wiserians said inappropriate things, like after a trip to the bathroom, a Wiserian commented, "Well, that took a long time." But these are the growing pains of a new vision and a new paradigm for ubiquitous computing, and these growing pains are to be expected. These last two issues are why we can't claim to have achieved a no AVAL state. So, to conclude, there are many benefits of using Wiserians, and our community, if we don't use them, is falling into real danger of failing to achieve Ubicomp 30-ish, 25-ish years after Ubicomp was first envisioned. Wiserians have the unique ability to sense, understand, and act, and it'd be a travesty not to take advantage of it. We've introduced this new AVAL metric and model for evaluating ubiquitous computing systems. We feel like the future of Ubicomp is in particularly good hands with Wiserians, and we will never, ever give up our goal of achieving a no AVAL state in Ubicomp. I do need to give a little bit of credit. This work was supported by Wiserians for a Better World. It's a non-profit organization that has been registered in most countries in the world now. If you want more information, please send credit card information, contact information, money to this email address. If you do send an email to this address, you will receive a copy of the scientific paper that we published as an auto reply. We happily invite you to join our cause. And with that, I'll end, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
I'm new to the community. This is my first time coming to this conference. But I'm a student at Georgia Tech, and I believe it's correctly pronounced Weezer and Avalon.
Yes, I believe you're right.
Yeah, very good question, but did you consider sort of another twist in it, getting rid of humans instead of getting rid of computers? It solves a lot of problems.
We actually did consider getting rid of computers, but we put all the Wiserians and ourselves under the job, so we chose not to take that path.
Hi, thank you. Floyd, Flo, thanks for sharing with that. which I entitled Missing the Walk in the Woods, which was unpublished, so thank you very much for publishing that statement. That's what but if you have to publish these things, you get the keynote, not the paper, because it's not published. Right? My question was, during my search for the talk, I found out that Mark Weiser was actually not just walking in the woods a lot, but he was also an avid drummer. And I think there's something to the fact that he was a drummer that reflects some of these thoughts, which is different to putting plants into an office. What if you would have put drum kit into that person's office?
I think it depends on the individual and what makes each individual calm. But the beautiful thing about Weiserians is that they would know, they would have this innate ability to know whether it was a drum kit that made you calm or plants that made you calm. I think there's room in the Weiserian doctrine for all.
Bruce Norman, and as someone who has been walking in the woods with my technology since 1985, I've never lectured or presented papers at such as, in a place like this. I haven't presented many lectures in the woods, and no one has ever complained about them, so it must be good. But I have learned some lessons from the computers themselves. I wanted to ask if you consider this. I live inside Emacs, and consequently use Lisp.
I'm sorry.
I'm not sorry. Because one of the problems with your movement, as an aside to what I was going to talk about, is that there are many times that the fact that I'm able to do something without really putting another human is quite free.
Well, the Weiserians don't believe in vertigo.
But my question is this. Have you considered the number of Weiserians you need iteratively to perform these functions for your existing Weiserians? And what happens when the person who is standing and maintaining the door for the other individual themselves needs several people to take care of their needs? And how do you account for that iteration? And therefore, how many humans living the dream can you achieve while all these other humans are taking care of the other humans?
That's a great question. One moment. Yes, we have considered it. Next question.
I stole my thunder because that's what I was going to ask. But something along those lines. The scalability of such a system. In the study you had 5 or 6 Weiserians for maybe an hour. How do you imagine the scaling for the growing population?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in all seriousness, those Weiserians were Weiserians in training. They're only in the first circle of our organization. It is expected that by the time Weiserians reach their third circle, that you will only need one for any kind of work to be a one-to-one relationship. And in fact, by the time you reach the 5th or 6th circle, depending on which Weiserian doctrine you believe in, that one person can handle many. So it is ultimately scalable.
Thanks for your talk. I was wondering if, for many of us who are considering the Weiserian position, what are the qualifications? Are there any physical characteristics? Short, tall? Thank you.
No, that's an excellent question. We obviously take all types. Tall people with longer arms tend to be a little less, they're more intrusive, but they have more abilities to reach into places, and particularly like me, to reach an ability to reach on high. Really the biggest criterion is that you have money to give to the cause and time.
Hi there, this is my first visit to Ubicomp. I'm thrilled to hear about Weiserians. I have a sort of technical question for you, Anind. Are Weiserians low power, or do you have to duty cycle?
Yeah, you do have to duty cycle them, unfortunately. You do have to duty cycle them. Which is an unfortunate problem that we're still working on.
And finally, if you run out of Weiserians, or you haven't got enough, I've got some androids for you.
Not keen of getting rid of humans and daily computers. Would an option be to use computers to mediate the interaction between Weiserians and humans, potentially eventually controlling the functionality and managing the Weiserians in a scalable, intelligent, and adaptive way? Would that be a way forward for Ubicomp? We accept Wiserians and put a layer of computing on top of that?
No. It would defeat the whole purpose. The whole idea is you're trying to get rid of these computers. Having this middle layer where people are dealing with computers and Wiserians are dealing with computers would just make, like my life today. That would be horrible. It's not a refreshing walk on the woods for me.